Hi, this is Stan. Welcome back to the Crow's Nest Railroad. Well, we have a little work to do today. The long, hot summer this year did some work on one section of my track, and so I've got to fix that. So if that sounds interesting, hope you can join me. Well, there you can see this morning I pulled one section of a panel out, got my various and sundry tools, and we have Rodney in the work train to help out if needed. We're going to put those buckets to use, that's for sure. A couple of years ago, when I put this track in, this area was completely shaded nearly all day long. And it was due to this overhanging tree. However, the neighbor had a crew come in and they did some tree trimming, and it cut out a lot of the shade that will come from this part of the sky in the midday and the afternoon. Plus, some of my plants didn't do so well here on my property. So the heat really worked on this aluminum rail, and I really didn't prepare this area for that sort of direct sunlight. So the track has lifted, and so we got to put it back down. Rather than dig everything around the ties, it was just easier for me to pull this track out. Plus, I think I'm going to take a hacksaw and shorten a couple of the rails now that I know this is going to be subject to some heat expansion. And I think you remember this other section was a problem with the heat, but I put these brackets down in there, these little tie plates and some all-thread spikes in there, and it allows the track to wiggle but not lift too much, and this has worked out pretty well. So we're going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to rebed this track, and then I'm going to anchor it down just a little bit. So let's get busy. Alright, that didn't take long. A lot easier with the panel out than trying to dig around all the ties. While we have this panel out, let's flip it over and take a look at the bottoms of those ties. These are untreated. They're simply cut up pieces of redwood that I bought at the big box store. And I gotta say, after a couple of years in the ground, they're looking really good. And before I start to level out the panel, I'm going to nibble just a little bit off the inside rail on both exposed ends with the hacksaw, just to give a little bit more of a gap. All right. And number two, the other rail looks good. I just wanted to shorten the two inside stubs. All right, I think I'm ready to lay the panel back down in. Alright, so let me connect the rail on both ends, sink some track screws in there, re-gauge it, you know, all the usual fun. Okay, the rail joiners are back in. I really can't believe I didn't drop and lose any of those tiny little bolts and nuts, but they're all back in, all the holes lined up. So now I'm going to go back with my track gauge and just tighten the track screws, put everything back together, and then we can start dumping on some ballast. And there you can see I added ample gaps for rail expansion. So once I re-gauge the track, then I'll come back and I'll snug up the rail joiners, but not uber tight. I want the rails to be able to slide a little bit at each joint. Most of the holes through the track are oval shaped, so we do want that rail to slide a little bit. All right, everything's connected back together, and I went through with the track gauges and realigned and re-gauged the track. If you're having trouble with derailments, first thing you should check is the spacing between the rails. If the rails are too close together, there's no forgiveness, because the flanges on the wheels will ride up and the cars will crawl off. A little bit of forgiveness if your gauge is slightly too wide, because you have the whole width of the wheel as sort of a safety margin, but not when the gauge is narrow. Now, somehow, when I put this all back together, I ended up with a leftover tie. Now, how does that happen? I don't see any big gaps. Oh well. Okay, time to shovel some ballast in here and do just some final tweaks to make sure it's level across the track. All right, the first bit of ballast has been shoveled and then brushed in. It's not completed yet, but let's go ahead and put those stakes in and see if we can just keep this track from bolting upwards so much as it expands and contracts in the heat. It's worked on that other turn, so let's give it a try here. Well, time to give this a bit of a test. The train is pretty empty, so the wagons are lightweight, and that's the most challenging time here on the Crow's Nest Railroad, is backing up with light wagons through the turns. If it's going to derail, that's usually where it's going to happen. So let's give it a test. Let me try that again. I felt a lot of debris. I don't think I got the rail completely cleaned out on the inside. I could feel the flanges kind of riding up on some stones. Let me quick sweep that again and try it again. Well, that feels pretty good. Well, that's going to do it for this week. I hope that was interesting. This is Stan saying thanks so much for joining us here on the Crow's Nest Railroad, and I'll see you right here next time.
Mm-hmm.